good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to the Artistic Vision of Theology podcast on theology and the arts. And today we have a special guest named Dr. Esther Lightcap Meek. She's a retired professor in philosophy from Geneva College, and she's really great. I came across her work early in my doctoral work. She has a book called Loving to Know, Longing to Know, and her most recent book is she takes philosophy to creativity and making, and it's called Doorway to Artistry. And it's a really helpful kind of philosophical take, intentional take on making and creating, whether you're in the kind of knowledge economy or in the artistic visual arts or music, whatever it is. And I think an interesting part of this conversation, so she talks a lot about like the thingness of things that we create. The material is pregnant with mystery. And so I thought she would be all on board with kind of a sacramental vision. It's about the thing, but there's something beyond the thing, the mystery beyond the thing. But it turns out she takes us to school that's not what she's saying, that she doesn't like the term sacramental. And I think the tendency maybe of the sacramental camp is to ignore the thingness, to ignore the matter and just get to like the God behind it. And we want to say both. And so I wish we had a little bit more time. Maybe we'll have to have her on again to kind of explore how different we are or close we are. I think we're closer than maybe she imagines us to be or something, but it was a fun conversation just for that kind of disagreement. So listen for the rub.
Yeah, when I read the book, I was like, amen, amen, amen. And then when I sort of recapped it back to her, she's like, that's actually what I was trying to reject. I'm like, oh, okay. So if for no other reason, you should listen to the podcast to hear her take us to school.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff for artists. I think that she's got a lot of knowledge, and sometimes I was just shaking my head. Okay, I want to act like I know what you're saying, but no, she's brilliant, and it is ultimately very helpful.
Wicked smart, as we say.
Wicked smart.
But yeah, so it's an intentional kind of philosophical take on the making and creating task. But I think as you listen and think about your own making, it'll make you a more thoughtful artist, or just maker in general, and hopefully more faithful to the task that you're called to. So without further ado, here she is, Dr. Esther Lightcap Meek. All right, Dr. Esther Lightcap Meek, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with you.
Yeah. So the first question we ask our guests is, what's your background with beauty? And so were you raised with an appreciation for the aesthetic? Did you arrive at that later? What's your background?
Well, I was born into a family of musicians, and so I was bred as a cheerleader because everything was performing all around me. So I still am very good at that, and there continue to be prodigies in my family that I have to support. So I've had excellence like in my family members. And so I would say music is the thing I'm way more attuned to than, say, painting. Although I have a daughter and son-in-law who are in, well, I guess you'd call it sculpture. He won a sculpture prize. It's a tactile art. So when I wrote my book, I spent a lot of time. I just always listen to my son-in-law too. So I guess that's my experience. And but I guess in my story, really in my groping toward figuring out what philosophy was, reading Francis Schaeffer in high school gave me automatic exuberance about interdisciplinary things, and so I do have to say I did want to be an artist in the official sense, and so being involved in that interdisciplinary way just seemed a no-brainer and a great, wonderful thing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And so, your background is that of a philosopher, which maybe stereotypically can be seen kind of this heady, academic, intellectual, and art seems to be kind of more of an embodied practice, appreciating, yeah, beauty and things like that. So it seems like they're different, and I don't think they are. I don't think you think they are. But what made you kind of write these kind of philosophical books, and now this book on art called Doorway to Artistry?
Well, Doorway to Artistry is on the creative act. It's not on artworks. And I have no competence with regard to that. But I have always just presumed creativity. And I have to say I'm a philosopher because I couldn't help the questions I found myself with when I was an early teenager. It took me a while to figure out that they were philosophical. Once I did, it was a 12-hour life change to pursue what I felt morally obligated to pursue. But then I found my way to philosophical work that integrally blends or just kind of makes knowing and artistry effectively the same thing. So, and I stumbled into that work in my early 20s. So that's formed me through and through after all these decades. And so it doesn't occur to me, if you're seeing a divorce there, then there's a problem with your philosophy and your artistry. But the problem is probably with your philosophy first. So, and then it just, thinking about my son-in-law, it just seems like what he's doing is like liquid philosophy. He's just, maybe liquid isn't the right word.
Nice.
Not what it is, but, he can't help himself but pursue reality. And that's what he does. So that seems pretty much similar to what I feel like I do. And I do think even if I had, I have confessed my sins about not practicing as I should have when my sister was teaching me piano. But I knew I could never be like her. And I was right about that. But it was that I could have done something. I am a singer, but I don't think of myself as a trained one. But what was I going to say? Even if I had the introvert tendencies enough to stay in practice rooms for hours, which excellence in piano takes, I still would have the philosophical questions. So, and they might have just, as they did, they might have trumped it, as it did with science. I mean, I started with a major in chemistry, and I love science. It's the same thing. Yeah. I realized I had these deeper questions that really undergirded the whole practice, that I just felt morally obligated to address.
It's interesting you say this book isn't about art per se, but you do say that the act of discovery, like maybe of the things already there-ness, as you put it, is done by acquiring an artistic vision. So could you talk a little bit more about how would you define an artistic vision?
I'm wondering, did I actually use that phrase?
You did. I was surprised to see that. You say this on page 39, you say, the discovery or artistic vision we seek is inviting us to press beyond our world to belong within another.
Oh, okay. So what I meant by that is, every creative act, including exceptional art, the person undergoing it has an idea out there that they're groping toward. So that's the far things. Remember, I talk about holding near and far things together. I talk about how the end sets the beginning, and all of that is the integrative act. So just like a scientist, a discoverer is groping toward the not yet known pattern, that's what the artist is doing too. So that's what I meant by artistic vision. So it's the thing that I say,
Yeah.
I want to do something like that, you know? And so that really is what I'm, the thesis of the book is that that's reality wooing me, beckoning me. And so as I present beauty following the Schindler account as an event of the real self-disclosure, really beauty becomes the welcome of the real, which, and the thesis of the book is that the real hospitably welcomes, and then our artful scrabbling toward it is our hospitable reciprocation and following where it leads. So you always have this groping from and toward, which is the structure of from to subsidiary focal integration in Michael Polanyi's account of knowing. So that's how I'm using it. Now, why don't you respond to me and tell me how does that go with your way of thinking of it, or how far apart are
It
they?
does. Yeah. No, I think so. I think that because what we're not what we're not necessarily going for an artistic, a sacramental way art, but a sacramental way of seeing. And that's what we're calling artistic vision. And like what you're saying, goodness, you've said things that are akin to over and over again. The searching for press beyond what we see to grasp the meaning that's beneath it, which is maybe the thing that makes it real, understanding and knowing by indwelling. To discover the true meaning of something. And so, yeah, it's the layers, the understanding that what you might see on the surface, that there might be more meaning below the surface to understand.
Well,
So,
I humbly suggest that was what I was trying to reject. So I really
yeah,
want to
well,
get away from an idea of meaning hidden behind and put it on the surface of things. So it's just the thing, right? So it doesn't need,
yeah,
the tree doesn't need something sacramental to make it absolutely awesome, right? So
yeah,
it's going for the primacy of the things, and kind of distancing myself from hidden meaning. There's more, but it's because the thing is a lively reality, a created, let there be of God. It doesn't need anything it doesn't need some sort of hidden meaning to be what it is. So don't know what just,
yeah. No,
I
I appreciate
your
that. I
approach
appreciate that.
is common, but I was trying to go for the primacy of things, just plain old ordinary things showing up and saying, here I am at your service. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that still takes maybe not a vision to draw it out or to find something that's hidden beneath it, but I think that you still talk a little bit about a contemplation or a composure, to be attentive to the things that make themselves known to us.
That's right, which is to ordinary things. We need to be
Yeah,
present to our garden to be gardeners, you know. So
yeah, I
uh,
love that.
they
Yeah.
continually surprise us because they're gardens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah, I think like one of the maybe arguments we make too, like in a modern sense where it's just the material, that's all it is, and it doesn't need attention, right? You can explain it, and
mm-hmm.
then we've kind of checked that off, master that, and I think our and I think we're agreeing perhaps like the indwelling, the attention to the ordinary and the mundane, um, is full of discovery and full of wonder. That's the kind of vision we want to kind of curate and cultivate.
Yeah. I just have found it No, this is me, and I'm stepping away from perhaps what seems a mainstream in Christian circles, and that is I want to dissociate the word sacramental. Because I
Mhm.
think that effectively downplays uh, tangible things in a way that doesn't go with Genesis 1. I think we need the presence and we need the attentiveness for the ordinary things to be
Mhm.
present to them. And
Yeah, I think maybe I'm sorry for
go
interrupting.
ahead.
No, I think that one of the criticisms maybe that a sacramental understanding might get is that it bypasses the literal instead of understanding that the literal is necessary. Even if you look at the sacraments,
Yeah,
you can't get rid of bread and wine or water. This is Jesus' chosen means of communicating to us. But I think like even some of what you said about mystery, which I loved so much, things being more than they are pregnant with mystery.
lovely. Yeah,
I think you say something. You say mystery is not the knowledge we lack, it is the depth and possibility we may be blessed to sense and evoke
yeah.
and be surprised by. When I read that, I'm like, that's what I meant to say, Dr. Meek. That's what I meant to
Well,
say.
I think it's obvious. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
I
not to say that it's we're bypassing the real. It's to say that the real is necessary, but it's pregnant with meaning, maybe that you're not even noticing.
yeah. But I'm always working, writing for the not yet believer. I want this to be for
Mm.
everybody, and so that's just been my agenda all along. And I feel that what you've got in folks who are creative and who are artists too, is an honoring of things. The carpenter with the wood, as DC Schindler says, is a philosopher, in the love of
Mm.
things. So, and I will say, this is so key to my growth over the years, and that is to come to have a way richer account of reality, so that reality, like I talk about the lively real in this book. So it's always surprising. It's both coherent and surprising. And there's always more. And it's the kind of experience that we have when we get to know a person. So even as a person, there's a
Mm.
person that we know well, there's this infinite depth. And that's just because the person's a created being. So mystery is the known thing. I think that sounds like G.K. Chesterton too. I think, mystery is the
Mm.
the known and loved part of
You mentioned a term when you were describing kind of some of your work, the subsidiary focal
yeah,
integration. And
good.
I'm sure there's some listeners who just thought, what? Can you explain what you mean by that?
I'd be happy to, and I humbly admit that if I could do it better without the terms, I probably ought to be doing that. But I do like the terms. So there was this
Yeah, yeah.
philosopher, scientist turned philosopher, premier scientist, premier scientific discoverer turned philosopher named Michael Polanyi, whose magnum opus is a book called Personal Knowledge that uh, it was his Gifford lectures mid 20th century, and was really his pitch to scientists about how knowing really has to work if you're going to discover things. And he's the one that
Mhm.
invented this terminology, and it was really in it has such a little part in personal knowledge, but he develops it more over the years. But what he wants to say is that all knowing has this relying on and scrabbling toward the focus of. So there's these two layers, from and to, and what you might realize is we talk a lot of times about aha moments. What you've got, that's the heart of knowing, is that breakthrough of insight, the aha moment or the moment of epiphany. And before that, as the discoverer would be, you've got this groping, scrabbling, ransacking towards something that you do not yet know. And then when it shows up, and it really is kind of an inbreaking from beyond, it integrates, meaning it puts things together in a such a coherent whole that it's irreducible to anything that we were working with before, and it transforms it all. And so then what you have is a new reality. I tell in Longing to Know the story of my little girls coming into the house and saying, "Mommy, Mommy, come look," and dragging me out into the woods behind our house and pointing down at my feet and pointing and saying, "Look." And I saw nothing. But eventually I saw this pattern of Hershey kisses. That's the telltale signature of a copperhead snake. And he was sitting there looking right up. So you
Oh
see,
my goodness.
there is, before I was looking at and focusing on and seeing nothing, but there had to be some kind of a switcheroo so that I started to attend from what I had been looking at. And so then when I attend from, then what happens is this pattern pops out and the snake says, "Here I am." But then what that pattern does is transform the clues. It transforms them. So it's not a linear process. It's this transforming, backward looking sort of a flip. And so after that, we're still relying on the clues to focus on the pattern. So it's in all knowing, your job is not to minimize the stuff you're relying on. In fact, you artfully work from it. If you switch over to any kind of skill now, think about that. All skills are subsidiary focal integration. Reading words, reading a book is subsidiary focal integration. In fact, all meaning is subsidiary focal integration. So if you think of reading, for example, you're looking at these marks on the page, before you can read, it can be pretty, like Chinese would be to me, right? But you're not reading until you start to relate subsidiarily to the marks on the page, and then the pattern of what are we, Lord of the Rings or whatever, where the world opens to us. So then we're still reading it. If you took the book away from under my nose, I couldn't read anymore, right? So it's not subconscious. We're actively subsidiarily relying on the text on the page, and attending from that to the farther pattern to which we're integrating of Lord of the Rings. So then, the part that excited me so much when I first found his work was the fact that when you have this moment of insight and the pattern breaks in, then it's just fraught with possibilities. So for Polanyi, the scientist, it's like he knew that if he found something, he knew he made contact with reality because he had a sense of the possibilities of its future manifestation, and they were inexhaustive. That's how you know you've made contact with reality. So that copperhead snake, I'll tell you what, when I saw him, I was grabbing my children and running the other way, So, reality breaks in like that. And just kind of scoops us up, which for me as a Christian believer, that seems a God thing, I mean, there's some pretty funny stories in the Bible. You think about Manoah, Samson's father, when the Lord shows up, or, there's just all these funny stories. I'm reading the end of Job right now. Oh, when reality shows up, you're the one that's answering the questions. You're the interrogated. You've stopped asking the questions and you've been called on the carpet. So reality shifts when you have that moment of insight.
Yeah. So if you were to apply these ideas to artists, how do you think these ideas help the creative task?
Well, I think it helps the whole project of art, especially in modernity, to see that first you have to fix your epistemology. Because so many people who write about art, they put reason over here and art over here. Now that can't help. Right? So to be able to say, look, that wasn't reason in the first place. And really, when you look at what you're actually doing, you can't help but doing when you're involved in knowing. It already is artful. It's already artful discovery. And you got to get that straight about your epistemology, even though maybe you haven't used that word before, to see, look, the artistic act really lies at the heart of coming to embrace reality, to be involved with reality in knowing. So I think that's a big deal. And then what I would say, and I am a writer, which maybe it has me be involved in the creative act. Let me say that, but I have enough experience, first, of how hard it is, but second of all, that you may not have the aha moment until the minute it's done, because it is a huge artistic decision to decide you're done. That you would like. I remember one thing I was writing. I can't remember now which one it was, but I wrote the last paragraph, and only then realized it was the last paragraph. So I'd written the whole thing, and I didn't get up in the morning and say, "Okay, today I'm going to finish it." I had no idea. It just kind of, there it was. So and my listening to artists bearing witness, it's a common theme. I mean, because you can wreck a painting, I would think, by not stopping when you should have. I think that's the case with books, and I think that's why we need critics and reviews. It's a very humbling and difficult groping that you do, and it does help to have a community to say, you're done, leave it alone, don't do anything else, or you need to do that. So I very much believe in other people editing my work too.
As an artist, restraint is a huge key. Every once in a while, I don't realize I'm doing it, but someone will say, "I love the restraint I see in that," and I'm like, well, if you only knew how many I overwork, trying, like, kind of grasping for something, and then the satisfaction of saying, man, I wish I would have stopped, or I'm glad I stopped. So I'm curious for you in your practice, but also philosophically, like in your approach to writing, even, how did you know when you were done, and what is it in us that wants to overwork something?
Well, I think understanding how subsidiary focal integration works, as you're groping toward the not yet known, right? Just think about that. And if you align the artistic process with what somebody searching to make a scientific discovery, let's talk about a cure for cancer, right? Whatever that is, you know what I'm saying? You're continually scrabbling in the dark. So one of the things you want to do is be gracious with yourself, which is, I can't say I am particularly. I will tell you one story that might bring comfort, and that is, I have a connection with the artist Makoto Fujimura, and some of his paintings, I'm sure have more than like 80 or 100 layers on them, which, when I first heard that, I thought, that is incredible. But then writing this the Doorway to Artistry, I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, I've got an infinite number of layers because I'm sitting at a laptop and I can delete. And I've done it
Yeah.
over and over and over and over again. So yeah, you gotta have a tough soul, or that seems like futility, right? And
Yeah.
there's reasons to end a book. I feel like my big fat book, Loving to Know, I had to end it when I did because it never would have ended, right? It took
Yeah.
so long. But then, as you know, Gary and Alex, I'm sure you've got an artistic practice too. Teaching certainly is an artistic practice. But, then one of the things I have to do, I bet everybody does, is step away. Just step away. Like take hands off of it. And actually, the publication process helps me with that. It's like at the point that you surrender it, to publishing, it becomes a thing on its own. And then, Alex, you're probably finding this if you get to teach your own books, that actually another reason I like publication is then I get to finally learn the book. Now that sounds really kooky, but that's how I felt is that it's only after the book is out there that I can start to come to know it because it's standing on its own. Then the other thing that you want, Gary, and Alex, and this is incredible too, and subsidiary focal integration helps with this too. Your work can be flawed because really the genius in it would be somebody else's seeing in it what is there. And that's subsidiary focal integration too. So and that's practically a spiritual experience, if a student says, oh, I get what you're saying, right? And you realize as a teacher, Alex, that it has maybe at most half to do with you. But most of it is with the other person. And so you can lay out what is a flawed, subpar, poor, okay, within range. Obviously, you want to do the best you can. But despite the flaws, change and insight can happen. So, and that's, as a teacher and a writer, and I guess as a painter too, that's incredibly humbling, but incredibly wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that gift of sharing, like that it's not known until somebody else sees it and resonates with it. That is always, it has to be someone other than me for me to actually know it and for it to be known as real. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Just practically speaking, what are some ways that art has helped you commune with the real? So it could be examples or it could just be principles that have helped you commune with the real.
Well, the art form I talk about the most in Doorway to Artistry, and it doesn't have a name, is I love to create things out of seashells. And I don't, I called them seashell creations when I was a teenager, but I'm still doing it. But I also, setting up this house, I talk about this in the book as like kind of a canvas that, first of all, it was a wrecked canvas, needed a whole lot of repair, still does. But then, bringing it from utter chaos. Oh my gosh, the chaos at the beginning was awful. To peace and beauty, I see that as a creative act, and one, I guess I live in it. I live in it, and I'm continually at it, day after day after day. People call it housekeeping, but or gardening or whatever. But I think I'm continually doing that. Now let's see. So. And then, like I said, I do love to sing. I especially love choral ensemble, and so I think about that a lot too. Now, having identified those, Alex, would you please repeat the question? Principles from
What are some ways that that art has helped you commune with the real. So, like in your practice, like what you're doing, you're communing with the real in housekeeping and gardening.
Yeah,
That's
I ought to add
in
writing. Yeah.
reality that way. Yeah, and then,
Well,
but are there other ways that like other people's arts have helped you commune with the real?
as a philosopher, as a person, with my philosophical questions, I was a skeptic. I was a product of modernity, right? Just coming to trust the real has been the signature thing of my life.
Mm,
And I think of myself
mm,
now as
mm,
an exuberant realist. I've gone from, an adolescent onset skeptic to an exuberant realist. And I would say that's our calling as educators, is to cultivate lovers of the real. And so I would say love
Mm.
of the real is the thing that would pull anybody into making, right? It's like I can't resist seashells. I just I can't. I better just take a bag down to the seaside, right? And be prepared. Even the bits of it, the colors, I can't get over the colors. My living room is all the colors you see at the seashore, and so I
Yeah.
would say reality itself draws me on. There's a section in, I would commend to you, in Loving to Know, in chapter 14, about, the standard, the stock subject in philosophy is sources of knowledge, and I've kind of innovated with regard to that. What is it that it is the source of our knowing? And I would say that it often comes from beyond. And that so then you see other people's work also obviously is inspiring, right? So the first example that comes to mind is when I lived in St. Louis, going to the botanical garden there, Shaw's Gardens. You just come home wanting to dig and plant things. And with my second daughter, I share a love of natives. And, she and I like nothing better than to either virtually or actually present with each other, shop for new plants and put them in. And my angle on it is not the native so much as just the design to make a peaceable place. But if you see somebody, just think about your response when you go into a Japanese garden, or, I would just say any sort of botanical garden. I don't know if you have any familiarity with Longwood Gardens in Philadelphia, which I grew up going to when it was free, believe it or not. I just to see that is to, you just come home and say, oh, I can make beauty here. So I would think that's a great example.
Yeah, it is.
And I love
Well,
watercolor.
last word. Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
I think it's so great. Yep. So I'd love to see your work, Gary.
It's thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to share it with you. Well, this has been really good. I thought, Alex, are we ready for the last word?
Yes, sir.
We wanted to give you the last word, simply to say, since a lot of the people that are listening to this are somehow artistically inclined, what would you like to share with artists who would call themselves Christian?
Yeah. Well, I really feel like the reason in Doorway to Artistry I argued for the primacy of things is precisely because I am a Christian. Because reality
Mm.
is him and his stuff. It is, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you open your eyes and your eyes land on what is his let there be. And I learned this from the philosopher Michael Hanby. The primacy of things, that philosophical notion is distinctively at home only in Christianity. Because ancient philosophy didn't have a transcendent enough God to let things be in their ownness, right? And
Oh, yeah.
modernity,
Yeah.
precisely in their reductivism, outright rejects the primacy of things. So this is profoundly subversive. And then I would say artists in their artistry, and artists, I'm into, every one of us being creative, right? In doing that, you are subverting modernity, right? And you're also voicing creation's praise just because you're loving your material. I mean, as I said in the book, that the little video of Mako in the shop where he gets his pulverized minerals from in Japan, he's like a kid in a candy shop. Well, okay, yes, it's precious minerals, but he can't contain his joy at being able to feel them and work with them, right? So
Yeah.
that tactile love of things, I think, is emblematic of the regard due a world of things that are the let there be of the Lord.
Good.
That's beautiful. I mean, you're all of this philosophy has been so central to my understanding of the world and the real, right? You have to love in order to know, you have to love in order to create. The primacy of love in your work is just so encouraging, and I think such a help. So thank you so much.
So great.
Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful to share it. I mean, how can you keep it to yourself,
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, Dr. Meek, and we'll hopefully talk again soon.